The morning air over Seoul carried a heaviness that felt almost physical, like the city knew before the announcement reached its streets. In the presidential compound, draped in a muted silence unusual for a weekday, something historic was unfolding behind doors carved with the crest of the Blue House. Reporters were already gathering outside, unsure of the subject but certain of the scale. A rarely scheduled national address. An emergency call from the office of the president. And an official podium being adjusted with the precision of an instrument tuned for a performance that would echo across nations. No one expected the name Yumenglong to appear in the official briefing. No one expected what happened next. It began with the soft sound of shoes pacing across a marble corridor, measured, deliberate, heavy with meaning. President Lee Jae-myung was moving toward the broadcast hall with the calm of a man who had been rehearsing emotions he wasn't sure he had the strength to display. His aides watched him with the solemnity of surgeons preparing for an operation that could not be undone. Everyone felt it. A truth was about to be spoken, one that carried weight beyond diplomacy, beyond politics, beyond borders. When the cameras turned on, the light reflected in his eyes revealed something raw, something fragile. He was not the unshakable political figure the world was used to seeing. He looked like a man confronting a memory that refused to stay buried. He inhaled, faced the millions watching, and spoke the name as though lifting it with both hands. Yumenglong. For a moment, the microphones captured nothing but silence. Then his voice, deep, steady, trembling beneath its strength, spread across the nation. He said the world had lost more than an actor, more than a cultural figure. He said Asia had lost a bridge, a pulse, a pathway of light connecting people who never met but somehow understood each other through his voice and presence. He said Yumenglong's work reached South Korea in a way that transcended language, a quiet influence, a subtle revolution. But then his speech shifted, unexpectedly, astonishingly, into a story no one had ever heard. He spoke of a night 6 years earlier, during a diplomatic event in Shanghai, where he encountered Yumenglong not as a celebrity but as a quiet figure sitting alone near the balcony, staring at a skyline that glittered like spilled treasure across the river. President Lee explained that he was drawn to him, not because he recognized his face, but because the silence surrounding him felt like a piece of poetry waiting to be read. I approached him, Lee said, and for the first time in my life, I felt as though I had met someone who could see the exact weight I carried, even though we came from different worlds. The audience was stunned. No record of that encounter had ever been released. Not in any tabloid, not in any archive, not in any diplomatic log. Yet here was the president revealing a private connection that had remained hidden beneath layers of politics and protocol. He described how Yumenglong spoke softly that night, his voice almost lost in the wind. How he talked about pressure, expectations, the loneliness of being celebrated, and the strange way fame sometimes felt like wearing a crown made of glass, shining brightly, cutting deeply. He told me, the president continued, that people often assume the brightest stars never fear the dark. But he feared it. He admitted it without shame. And I have remembered his words every single time the burden of leadership threatened to silence me. Those words swept over the country like a storm. Citizens froze mid-commute. Office workers stopped typing. Families turned up their televisions. Even passing trains seemed to hum slower, as though Korea itself leaned closer to the story. But then the broadcast took a turn no journalist predicted, a shift from memory to mystery. President Lee revealed that just days before the world learned of the tragedy surrounding Yumenglong, he had received an unexpected message from a restricted number. A short voicemail. A whisper. A voice he hadn't heard since that balcony in Shanghai. He said it arrived at 3:17 a.m., as if carried through the static of the night itself. The room grew still as he recited it. If the wind reaches you before I do, tell them I tried. Tell them I kept the promise. Those watching felt chills crawl up their arms. The international media scrambled for translations, their voices cracking as they repeated the president's words. What promise? To whom? And why him? Lee explained that the message was so faint he listened to it 23 times to be certain. It was unmistakably Yumenglong's voice, gentle, tired, but determined. He said the message struck him like a prophecy delivered too late. A whisper from someone standing at the border between presence and disappearance. The president admitted he didn't fully understand what Yumenglong meant. But he believed the message was meant for the world, not for him alone. It was a symbol, a final flicker of light from a man who spent his life shining for others even when his own shadows grew long. But the emotional tribute didn't end there. President Lee stepped away from the podium briefly, then returned with something wrapped in silk, a letter. He said it had been delivered to his office anonymously the same morning as the voicemail. A letter written in elegant, flowing Chinese handwriting. No signature. No explanation. Just a message. Light doesn't die. It changes rooms. He lifted the letter for the cameras, not revealing its full content, but enough to confirm it was real. Enough to ignite 1,000 theories. Enough to unravel the internet within seconds. And then the president did something unprecedented in the history of South Korean politics. He bowed, not the formal diplomatic incline, not the polite tilt expected from officials. He bent fully, deeply, with the sincerity of a man paying respect not to a celebrity, but to a soul who had touched him quietly, privately, timelessly. It was a bow that echoed across Asia. The journalists outside the Blue House erupted. Live streams spiked. People burst into tears. Korean social media exploded with hashtags honoring Yumenglong in both Hangul and Mandarin. Entire subway platforms fell silent as screens replayed the moment on loop. But the speech still wasn't over. President Lee lifted his head with the conviction of someone who had placed vulnerability above power. Then he said something that startled even his closest advisors. Yumenglong's passing is not simply a loss. It is a message. A reminder that even the brightest among us can be fighting battles unseen. This is not just about entertainment or politics. This is about humanity. He urged Asia, governments, industries, audiences, to look deeper, to listen better, to understand what their luminaries endure behind the scenes. He called for better protection of artists, better emotional support structures, better accountability for organizations that push their talents beyond breaking points. He ended with a sentence that would become historic. We failed to hear him then. We must hear him now. As the broadcast concluded, something incredible happened. Thousands of South Koreans began gathering spontaneously outside the Blue House, holding white flowers, paper lanterns, photographs of Yumenglong, and candles that glowed against the dusk. Police did not disperse them. The president himself stepped outside among them, without announcement or escort, and stood silently among the crowd. A child handed him a paper crane. A grandmother whispered a prayer. A group of college students played the OST from Yumenglong's Cdrama, its melody trembling in the cold air. Everything felt connected, like chapters of a story unfolding across borders, aligning with every previous tale surrounding Yumenglong's mysterious final days. The voicemail. The secret apartment. The makeup artist who vanished. The final whispered confession. The strange chain of events that linked China, Korea, and echoes beyond. This tribute felt like the missing piece, a bridge between continents, an emotional truth spoken by a man who had carried it quietly for years. As night deepened, the lanterns rose into the soul sky like floating memories, each carrying a silent wish, each reflecting a fragment of the legacy Yumenglong left behind. And as the president watched them drift upward, his eyes shimmered with the reflection of a star none of them could see anymore but could still feel everywhere. Some said they saw him whisper something under his breath. Some said it sounded like a prayer. Others believed it was a promise. But those closest to him insisted it was just one sentence. Light doesn't die. And beneath the glow of thousands of lanterns drifting into the darkness, no one disagreed. The silence that settled over Seoul after President Lee Jae-myung's historic address didn't fade, it thickened. It felt as if the entire country was holding its breath, clinging to every syllable he had spoken, replaying his tribute in loops that echoed through living rooms, subway speakers, and office lobbies. What began as a formal statement had spiraled into something larger, something spiritual, something that touched nerves buried too deep to be explained by politics or celebrity alone. Yet what the world saw on camera was only a fraction of what unfolded inside the Blue House that morning. Behind the scenes, moments before the address, the president had been seen standing alone in the reflection hall, a room rarely visited except in times of national grief. The hall, with its mirrored pillars and ceiling painted with constellations, was designed to give leaders a moment to face themselves without the armor of office. It was there that he unwrapped the mysterious letter delivered that dawn. His hands trembled slightly as he unfolded the silk, revealing the ink still glistening as if written moments before. Witnesses claimed that when he read it, his expression changed, from shock, to recognition, to something like heartbreak. The letter, they said, carried a faint scent of sandalwood. And some staff whispered later that they heard him murmur a line too soft to understand, except for the last word, promise. Minutes later, he emerged with the calm of a man who had been rearranged from the inside out. That was the man the world saw at the podium. And yet, the broadcast failed to capture the moment that followed immediately after the cameras switched off. As the technicians powered down the equipment, one of the lights flickered. A brief, single pulse, sharp and cold. The president froze, staring at it as though recognizing something no one else could see. One aide asked if he needed a rest. He shook his head but didn't speak. Instead, he placed the letter back into the silk and held it against his chest, whispering something in Mandarin, words he had memorized from the balcony conversation 6 years ago. Outside, reporters felt the air shift. A gust of wind swept across the courtyard, lifting the papers from their hands, rustling the flags overhead. It felt like an arrival. Or a warning. And then the question came, the one no one dared say aloud but everyone felt pressing against their ribs. Why did Yumenglong's final message go to a foreign president? Why him? Why now? The continuation of the tribute unfolded when President Lee stepped outside to meet the gathering crowd. His security team protested, but he ignored them. He walked through the blue house gates with the gentle slowness of a man entering a sacred space. The people parted for him instinctively, as though recognizing the grief he carried. Then something extraordinary happened, something the cameras barely captured. A young woman in the crowd, shaking with emotion, held up her phone and said she had recorded something strange from the televised address. She swore she heard an extra sound in the silence right after the president quoted the voicemail, a faint echo, like a whisper layered beneath the broadcast audio. When she played it for him, the president listened with the intensity of someone hunting for proof. The crowd leaned in. The recording hissed with static, but beneath it, barely audible, was a breath. A soft exhale. A sound that seemed too human, too deliberate, to be an error. Some said it was interference. Others said it was impossible. But the president's reaction told a different story. His eyes widened, just a fraction. Enough for those closest to him to exchange alarmed glances. He asked the woman to send him the clip. He thanked her with a bow deeper than expected. Then he stared at the lanterns rising into the evening sky as though searching for a shape among them. The mysteries thickened as the night continued. Standing amid the crowd, the president spoke in a low voice about the balcony conversation, the one he had revealed publicly for the first time earlier that day. But he shared additional details now, details he hadn't dared expose on television. He said Yumenglong had mentioned something unusual that night, a dream he kept having, one he called the signal dream. In it, he said he saw lights flickering in a pattern, like a code, like a call meant only for him. He said he didn't know whether the dream was a warning or a promise. He said he felt the dream would chase him one day, and when it did, he hoped someone would understand. Back then, the president had assumed it was poetic metaphor. Now he wasn't so sure. The crowd listened in stunned silence as he shared this unseen fragment of their encounter. Tears streamed down faces illuminated by lanterns. The city hummed softly beneath their feet, as though listening too. Then a sudden gust lifted the lanterns higher. Their flames twirled bright enough to reflect in the president's eyes. People gasped, not because of the wind, but because at that exact moment, the lights of the blue house flickered again. Once. Twice. In the same cadence as the studio light earlier. 2 flickers. A pause. 2 more. A pattern. The president stared at the building behind him, understanding something he did not voice. It was the same rhythm he heard in Yumenglong's whispered voicemail before the words began. A signal. A breath before speech. A moment before truth. It wasn't proof of anything. But it wasn't nothing, either. As the crowd grew thicker and the lanterns multiplied, the president stepped aside with one of his closest advisors. Their voices were low but urgent. Some witnesses swore they heard one sentence. It's starting again. Others insisted he said. He warned me this would come. But no one could say for certain. What everyone agreed on was this. The tribute had opened something. Something emotional. Something political. Something unexplained. And the president knew it. As the night wound down, he placed the silk-covered letter into a secure envelope and whispered the same phrase he had spoken at the podium. Light doesn't die. But then he added something new, something that froze the breath of the guard standing behind him. It returns. And beneath the lantern-lit glow of Seoul's grieving sky, that single sentence felt less like comfort. And more like a prophecy.